could you give us just briefly some of your reflections from the Global Green Growth Institute perspective on the presentations you've made so far? And also, could you talk about how we could perhaps maximize the impact of some of the projects that we're good examples of today?
Thank you, Callum. As Callum introduced, I'm working for Global Green Growth Institute. Before I start my comment, the GGGI issue is not Korean non-profit foundation anymore. We have 16 member states. So I'm actually representing, I'm not actually representing Korean perspective of green growth. This is just for information. Let me start by sharing my observation observation on several presentations done by other speakers here. Firstly, I think as Ganesh explained at the beginning of his presentation, the nature as it is can be solution for infrastructure. I very much buy that comment because but the nature itself is changing and then changing pace, how it works. But then let's think about how we work on economic activities and development of human beings. I think it also changes its pace. Just think about this changing paradigm. I don't need this drawing.
The spotlight there.
Yeah, so just think about the human activity in terms of economic growth and development. Actually, there is a huge paradigm shift from west to east, from north to south, from central to local and provincial level, as well as decentralized and distributed communication from centralized. I think green growth itself is one of the viable way to follow on this kind of economic growth and development. So, does this sound like another rhetoric, as Salma said? But I think we do need some time of time to think about this kind of rhetoric, because sometimes rhetoric can actually boost some political will, as well as to secure some raise public awareness, as well as it can actually give more confidence for the sustainable consumption. So in the past, globalization sounds like kind of silver bullet, but we need more kind of time to think about this rhetoric, because there are many negative impacts on this kind of other rhetoric. So I think these are the bottom line is that the green growth is a way to chart new development pathway. The reason I talk about this is that the economic behavior and the development aspect is also changing kind of paradigm to pursue. So that's why green growth is to chart the development pathway for developing an emerging market, because they don't just follow existing pathways for the development and growth, because the resources become very scarce, and then there's also negative impact of the nature, such as climate change and biodiversity. So that is the basic objective of green growth. And then I was very pleased to listen from Salman that the recent Rio Summit produced this political outcome, which is the future we want, which also proclaimed that and focused on bottom-up and country regional read approach. Green growth is following up those approaches as well, as I commented in the beginning, from south, from west, from local, and as well as distributed level. So another way of the green growth is actually to make some enabling environment to actually disseminate this kind of kind of the perspective of green growth, which might be different or should be different from existing development paradigms.
Great, thank you very much. And if we move on to Valerie, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you were only able to join us towards the end of the presentation, so I won't ask you to give your interpretation of what was said. But what I will say is that we did hear a lot of talk about social and community involvement in green growth. It's not just obviously about the environment and not just about economy. So from the work that you're doing in the World Bank, I mean, how are you engaging with communities, or how do you encourage engagement with communities on these issues?
Thank you, Callum. And I do want to apologize for coming late. I've actually just come from another panel that was discussing natural infrastructure and how that is becoming a part of green growth. And of course, there's nothing more natural than water. I'm thinking about how water is a part of green growth, so I'm very pleased to be part of this panel because the World Bank is very concerned with water and with green growth. But we no longer just talk about green growth. We talk about inclusive green growth. Because what we do not want to see, as my colleague just talked about, this is a new development pathway, but we want to make sure that the old pathways, where some people benefited and some people didn't, also change. Where we have inclusive green growth that embraces communities, that embraces the poor, that embraces the vulnerable. And in the water sector in particular, this is going to be important. Because as water becomes more and more scarce, if you think about some of the facts and figures, we're going to need 45% more water than we have access to today to feed the world by 2030. So can you imagine how much more water we're going to need by the time we get to a world of 9 billion people in 2050? And so as water becomes scarce, access to water may become very unequal. And this is something that we stand ready to fight against. Because it's important for us that the benefits of water do not just accrue to the most lucky, the most fortunate, the most wealthy. And that's why we talk about inclusive green growth. That's why it's important for us when we think about water that the first and foremost thing that we have to do is get the policy fundamentals right. We have to make sure the policy framework is transparent and it's inclusive. That however we're going to deal with water, which you have to remember is no longer a local issue. Just because some people may believe that they have plenty of water now, their water sources may change, but other people are going to come looking for that water. So we have to get the policy fundamentals right. And those policy fundamentals have to include an emphasis on rights-based management. We have to make sure that the water services, access to the delivery of those services is equitable and is affordable, particularly for the poorest in society.
Great, thank you very much. So maybe continuing this theme slightly, I'd like to turn to Salma. You were talking about, in your presentation, capacity building. And I'm sort of curious as to how we can really start to build capacity on the ground around water and green growth.
I have been involved in capacity building for Southeast Asia since thousands. We are part associated with Cabinet UNDP, Till now, we are still trying to tell some of our member countries what is IWA. And that was started, as I said, offshoot of Rio 1982. That's why I was talking about storyboards, in the sense that while you have your modules, you also need to have some visuals. Particularly as I said, there are communication gaps between those of us at the international level and those at the national. Can I just pick Valerie's point on 45% need for agriculture? The increase, because that's something that we have been very worried about, because the agriculture sector, as I said just now, keeps saying that their water endowment is being reduced. I think we all need to realize that there is no extra water. There's only this one globe. And the way we are planning our development is as though we have and the way we are using is as though we have 2 globes. And the way we are planning is as though we have 3 globes. We don't have that. So how do we help each other to understand? And I think that's the thing that needs to be, brought down to the national level. In countries that are so rich in water, in my country, for example, we just go from basin to basin transfers. The Klang River Basin, for example, has only, I'm using figures, 7.4 million, and it has, then it gets basin transfers from the others, because ours are just like Korean and Japanese, short and swift. But we need to tell the leaders that you clean your river and you can recycle. And I don't know how World Bank can help and how ASCAP. I think that's where I was saying, since our Secretary General is Ban Ki-moon wants to strengthen our mandate, why not use the regional commission to get commitment from the member countries?
Very good. Thinking about that, I mean, you said we just have the one globe, obviously, and it's a finite supply of water. And thinking a bit about Ganesh was talking about at the beginning about the value of ecosystem services, and I guess within that you have environmental flows. So it's not just water for human consumption, water is required for ecosystems as well. When we're placing value on those ecosystem services, there's obviously this one subjective element to it. So there are risks that if we don't see a value in the service, is that ecosystem service, is that ecosystem at risk because we don't see a value to humans?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'm thinking that I don't want to give a theoretical answer to it, and I think I will give a quick answer with an example. And this is what we have been doing recently between the India-Bangladesh, one of our projects, Ecosystem for Life. If you talked about environmental flow itself, that was a red flag between the 2 countries. Let's understand the diplomacy issues. When we talk of environmental flows, so I'm not again touching that part. But the point I want to bring in here, therefore, is that we approached it in the view that both sides in the Ganges, they love this fish called the hilsa. And now, in fact, the Chinese love it, so that's another issue. It's all getting marketed there. And where the average income is $1 a day, the hilsa, 1 kilo of hilsa is about $10 at landing. So I think that's the economic angle of the fish. Okay, it's a fish that both the countries love, the people on the Ganges. So what we did is that how do we then work with the fishermen and looking at taking the hilsa as a species from an economic point of view, and then looking at flows, because then you need the hilsa for its spawning, for its other, it needs a specific kind of flow in the river, it needs specific quality in the river. So that's how the way we looked at environmental flows now, under the issue of livelihood, under the issue of flows, under the issue of economics. So I think that's the way one has to work on it. Otherwise, we'll be in the realm where it's very good research in the universities, which is fine, but we cannot take it at the level of policy where we want to push these things. If you take environmental flow at a dialogue meeting between India and Bangladesh, there will be no dialogue. But I'm being blunt and realistic from the ground, and that's where one has to therefore work is how do we incorporate the issues where even like we were saying, it's the people now when the fishermen on both sides are coming up front for this dialogue. No way that the politician is going to be away from the dialogue. I think that's how one has to build, and this is where I also feel that when I talked in my presentation, if you want to promote green growth, that's the way we need to do it. It's not from a kind of the academic angle, but an angle from where we are trying to say that, all these things we all know, but how do we really sell it? I think I stop with that.
So being quite practical and on the ground.
Yeah, and being clever of what is it that matters, and you don't realize that we all in this room understand it's not we who do the policies, it's the politicians who do the policies. If they are not educated, the rest of the capacity building can go on for the next 100 years, and that's why I'm saying that the politics at the political level is also a 5-year cycle politics, and that's where I'm saying that if a politician sees that there are 1,000 people in a meeting, he's obviously jolly well going to come for that meeting. And I have friends here, Dr. R.B.S. Rathore and Noel, who are bureaucrats in the government of India, who are actually working with the people and then at the policy level with the politicians, and he, I'm sure, will be in a better position to, say what I just said, that this is the thin line that you have to draw, it's how do you, take these small steps towards some of these issues that we're talking about. Otherwise, they are very interesting and we all know them. But as we all come back, why is it? It's not the finance part. It's still the part of, the attitudinal and behavioral change also what I said in the morning.
Could I add something?
Sure.
I'd just like to add something to that because I happen to live on the Hudson River, which is in New York, of course. And we always say that the environmental movement started in the Hudson River because the fishermen got fed up when all the fish started to die. And I've seen that happen in Thailand too. The fishermen got fed up and they went to protest to the government. They said, we will not stand for this pollution anymore. And finally, when they were making a protest and they were in Parliament and in New York, it spawned the movement of the Riverkeeper and so on, and the environmental movement, and led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Water Act. That was because the fish started to die. So, the environmental flows lead from the perception of the people who live along the river that they cannot stand it anymore. And that is about environmental flows. It's not about building dams or anything else. It's just about environmental flows.
Good example. One last topic I'd like to touch upon, and then we'll move to questions. And there's been some discussion about, Ganesh, you talked about that green growth isn't just about developing countries, and Osama was talking about the developing country perspective. But I'm curious, and Korea has been through this journey with green growth, and has, as an economy, has transitioned from a developing economy to a developed economy. How is the messaging different, I suppose, for developing countries and developed countries? What are the key messages that should be going to these different types of economies? So this is an open question to anyone on the panel.
Actually, without any cooperation from the society, like the ordinary people, the government cannot succeed their policies, their policy wheels as well. From the perspective of Korean history, actually, during the industrialization period, the government strongly propelled the unbalanced economic growth and social growth as well. But the people, lay people, strongly responded to what I mean is deeply responded to the government policies. Maybe you heard of Semarugo, which is a very strong movement from the bottom of village, I think. So government gives a message to the people: you can be rich, you can overcome these problems. So that message inspires people to get over the poverty. So from that social response, we can succeed in our economy and social development as well. And secondly, but nowadays, and also I showed separate events like industrialization and also eco-friendly management of dams, something like that. From the basis, in the basis, there are strong pressure from the society. Actually, without that kind of social pressure, maybe the past was not changed by the government. But in developed countries, maybe there are some very sophisticated methods to incorporate social opinion from the public as well. So we have that kind of mechanism nowadays. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is the pressure from the public, and they intend to raise their voice to reflect their opinion in the policy mechanism. That's very important thing.
I think we're really running out of time. So does anyone have any questions? We can start here. Could you just tell us your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Rahul from India, Forester. I'm extremely happy to hear all the ideas of all the panelists and speakers. I so thorough, please bear with me. In order to ensure inclusive green growth, and as it was mentioned by Dr. Salman, with the multi-sectoral integrated approach, what I feel, there were 3-4 missing links which could be considered, especially for the 7th World Water Forum, the year 2015. Number one, in all of the presentations, there were missing links so far in the importance of glaciers, importance of the, I would say, white ocean in the whole of the world. If I give example of Hindu-Kush-Himalayan region, starting from Afghanistan to Myanmar, it has more than 15,000 glaciers. Now, what would be our approach in order to adapt to climate change? B, they are the lifeline for millions of even, maybe in Asia it's billion, whether it's China or India or other nations.